It's disappointing, isn't it, with the threat of a new junior doctors' strike. And this is sort of a crisis of conscience as much as one of contracts. Britain's resident doctors, formerly called junior doctors, are now going out on strike again for the 12th time since March 2023 for 5 full days. And all this despite being awarded one of the most generous public pay rises in the country over the last 3 years, a staggering 28.9% increase. Let's be clear, this is not a dispute between a stingy employer and desperate staff. It is now tragically a ritualised confrontation staged with what looks like annual predictability, in which the NHS, patients and public trust are the collateral damage. The British Medical Association, the BMA, is demanding a 29% pay rise, and they claim this would restore real-term earnings to 2008 levels, and their argument since then inflation and pay freezes have eroded salaries. But let's test that claim. Since 2022, resident doctors have already received a 22% increase over 2 years under the Conservative government, an additional 5.4% average rise from Labour in 2024. Other financial perks are on the table, including help with exam fees, rotas, placements, and even discussions around student loan burdens. No other public sector profession, not nurses, teachers or paramedics, has received comparable uplifts in that time. And yet doctors are back on the picket line. Now, of course, I have a lot of sympathy for doctors, nurses and paramedics who and surgeons who do the real work in hospitals, who do the real work at the cutting edge and the front line of the NHS. And meanwhile, they can see quite clearly that bureaucrats, often with very little training and demonstrably incapable, are commanding much bigger salaries. That, of course, is absolutely wrong. That is detestable. That is one of the reasons why the NHS is failing. But this cannot become an annual fixture. Britain cannot operate with a health service that takes extended industrial action every summer. The precedent being set is corrosive. First, it undermines the very idea of negotiation. Streeting was right to say that refusing to postpone strike action while talks are still open shows disdain for patients and a lack of good faith. Second, it ignores proportionality. The NHS is still recovering from COVID backlogs. Nearly 1.5 million appointments have been rescheduled since strikes began, and the current action will add tens of thousands more. Third, it politicises the NHS in ways that fracture rather than repair. Strikes in wartime, strikes in pandemic recovery, strikes in the middle of record pay hikes. This is less about restoration and more about institutional brinkmanship. And there are valid frustrations: heavy workloads, poor morale, medical school debt, delayed progression, a lack of consultant jobs. These are real, but what the government offered was nothing. It was not nothing. It was full reform of working conditions, cost relief on mandatory exams, control over placements and job creation, dialogue over debt and welfare. Yet the BMA declared that the only pay restoration was the only thing that mattered. This is a mistake, and their stance is now politically isolated. Even the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, a normally cautious body, urged the BMA to drop it. It's don't tell your employer policy and reconsider its posture. Public support too is dropping. According to YouGov, 52% of the public now oppose the strikes, and among the over 65s, that group most reliant on NHS care, that number rises to 70% who oppose the strikes. NHS England under Sir Jim Mackey is right to resist this time. Hospitals are being instructed to press on with routine care where possible. Strikes must not be cost neutral for the strikers. No more overtime backfill that allows lost wages to be reclaimed after disrupting services. And why? Because this is not a just war. This is not an existential fight for fair pay. This is a continuation of an outdated grievance on a battlefield where terms have already changed. If this becomes an annual summer ritual, the NHS will hemorrhage goodwill among the public. Senior doctors and consultants will disengage, either refusing to cover or charging unsustainable locum rates. Private healthcare uptake will rise, deepening inequality and undermining the founding ethos of the NHS, and politically, Labour will find itself caught in a no-win game, either alienating the unions or losing Middle England's trust that it can run public services effectively. This strike is reckless. It's needlessly disruptive, and it risks becoming institutionalised as a destructive norm. No one denies the skill and the sacrifice of our doctors, but leadership must come with proportion, and protest must come with responsibility. The government cannot and should not grant nearly 30% more simply because the BMA wants it. This is no longer about pay. It's about power, and unless we break this cycle, the real patients won't be in hospitals, they'll be the NHS itself.